It was the spring of 1980 in Manchester, New Hampshire, when I first came across the Ron file. 14 years old, Lorene Ann Ron had been gone less than a day, but her mother's voice on the phone told me this wasn't some ordinary runaway. Lorene had been born here in Manchester in April of 1966, but her early life was scattered. Her parents split before she could walk. Her father wasn't much in the picture, and by the age of 4, she and her mother, Judith, had moved to Miami looking for a clean slate. That didn't last. By 1976, they were back in New Hampshire, living in a third-floor apartment within walking distance of her junior high school. Lorene was what her friends called a dreamer, a girl who loved singing, dancing, and talking about leaving this small city for something bigger. Her mother was close to her, but there were cracks, the kind most teenagers keep hidden. Drinking, smoking, bending rules when no one was looking. Judith had been seeing a professional tennis player, and on April 26th, she planned to accompany him to a match out of town. Normally, Lorene tagged along, but this time, on spring break, she wanted to stay home alone. Judith hesitated, but with her daughter's 14th birthday only weeks away, she agreed. According to what I later pieced together, Lorene spent most of that Saturday doing chores, watching TV, and calling friends. She walked to a local liquor store, not for work exactly, but she'd been known to run small errands for free drinks. That afternoon, she returned home with a bottle of wine and a 6-pack of beer. She called 2 friends, a boy and a girl, inviting them over to drink and listen to music. Around 12:30 a.m., the 3 heard loud voices in the hallway. They panicked, worried it might be Judith, and the boy slipped out the back door. One detail sticks with me. The door locked behind him. It wasn't Judith. She wouldn't return until about 1:15 a.m. When she and her boyfriend arrived, they noticed something off before they even reached the apartment. All the hallway lights on all 3 floors were out. Not burned out, unscrewed, every bulb. The apartment door was unlocked. Inside, the boyfriend found the back door open. Judith, heading to her daughter's room, saw someone in the bed. But it wasn't Lorene. It was her female friend. The friend explained they'd been drinking together until sometime between 12:30 and 1, when Lorene took a blanket and went to sleep on the couch. But now she wasn't there. No signs of forced entry. No signs of a struggle. Her purse and shoes were still by the couch, but her clothes from earlier, jeans, a blue plaid blouse, and a light sweater, were gone. Judith called around. Nothing. By 4 a.m., she flagged down a patrol officer. We began canvassing the area, interviewing friends, family, and neighbors. Both friends who'd been there were cleared. Some mentioned that Lorene often talked about running away. A bus company employee claimed he'd sold a ticket to someone matching her description the day she vanished. A driver even swore he'd seen her get off in Boston. Weeks later, shown a recent photo, he wasn't so sure. The lead collapsed. Judith never bought the runaway theory. She insisted Lorene would have taken her belongings and contacted her eventually. Then, in October, 5 months later, Judith's phone bill showed 3 calls from hotels in Santa Ana and Santa Monica, California, one to a hotline for exploited teens. The man who ran it denied knowing anything. Around the same time, Judith began receiving silent phone calls at 3:45 a.m. They went on for years. Her sister claimed she'd received calls from a young woman asking for Mike, using the same nickname Lorene once had. By 1985, an investigator revisiting the hotline got the man to admit that runaway teens sometimes stayed in his home, including possibly one from New Hampshire. One of the hotels was rumored to have been used by a man known only as Dr. Z, involved in illicit videos. That rumor never went anywhere. The last credible whisper came from a childhood sweetheart who said a girl named Lori called his house. His mother took the message. He was convinced it was her. From that night on, Lorene Ron existed only in the holes of the story. An unlocked door, darkened hallways, belongings left behind, and a mother who still believed she didn't leave by choice. January 21st, 2008, a finance building in Taiwan. I wasn't on scene that morning, but I've walked those same halls since. The guard on duty had arrived around 7 a.m. The building was one of the few modern ones in the area, an 11-story block, glass and steel, standing awkwardly above older rooftops. quiet, respectable tenants. No one left things lying around. But there, in one of the elevators, the guard found them. A red coat, a smaller pink jacket, and two neatly placed pairs of shoes. In the dead of winter. He checked the security feeds. At 9 p.m. the night before, the camera caught a woman carrying a small girl, later identified as 37-year-old Liu and her 4-year-old daughter. Liu looked hurried but distracted, removing first her own coat, then her daughter's, then their shoes. She stared at the elevator's floor numbers like they held an answer. They stepped off on the 11th floor, turned left, and entered the stairwell. And then, nothing. There was no footage of them leaving by any exit, no trace on any other floor. Her motorcycle was still parked outside. A teenage girl in the lobby recalled seeing her walk in that night, but nothing after. The 11th floor held only 2 occupied units, a Buddhist temple and an HR agency. The roof, basement, utility rooms, all checked. No sign. Liu's history painted a picture of a woman under strain, a mother of 4, twice married to the same man, an abusive drinker. She had divorced him once, taken him back, and found nothing had changed. By 2008, she was essentially raising the children alone, debt mounting. The night she disappeared, she'd argued with him again. She told her eldest daughter and her mother she was going to stay with a friend for a few days. She left with her youngest child, no ID, no wallet, no phone. Theories swirled. Suicide from the roof, no bodies found. A breakdown, abandoning her identity. Why take the child? A secret lover in the building? No resident admitted knowing her, and the guard had never seen her before. The simplest and most chilling was that something happened to them inside that building. The kind of thing that leaves no sound, no witness, and somehow no evidence on camera. 5 years later, the case was reopened. The building was searched again, top to bottom. Nothing. Today, the only certainty is in the footage. A mother and child stepping into an elevator, stepping out into a hallway, and then disappearing into the unlit space between frames. As I walked into the briefing room, the air was thick with the grim reality of our latest case. It started with a phone call, a routine report of a missing person that would soon unravel into one of the most chilling cases of my career. The details were sparse, just a name, Margaret Hogg, and a date, October 1976. Her husband, Peter, an airline pilot, claimed she'd run off with another man. For a while, that's all it was, a domestic dispute, a woman leaving her life behind. We filed it away, another missing person in a city of millions, with no evidence of foul play. Fast forward 8 years. I got a call from a rookie working a case up in the Lake District. A group of divers, the kind who regularly explored the depths of wastewater, had a bizarre story. They'd been using a weighted bundle as a training prop for nearly a decade, a heavy, carpet-wrapped object they'd swim with to build strength. A new diver on the scene had a different gut feeling. He thought it might be connected to a missing French tourist, so he reported it. We sent our team out. Pulling the bundle from the icy water, I could feel the weight of it, the years of cold seeping into my bones. As we unwrapped the layers of fabric, carpet, and electrical tape, the smell of the lake gave way to something far more sinister. There she was, Margaret Hogg. The frigid water had preserved her in a state of eerie stasis, her mascara still perfectly in place. But she wasn't the young tourist. The woman in the bundle was middle-aged. The breakthrough came with a glint of gold on her finger, a wedding ring engraved with the words, Margaret 151163 Peter. The dates, the names, it was all there. We matched dental records, and the missing person case we'd shelved years ago came roaring back to life. Peter Hogg, the loving husband who'd reported her missing. The same man who had initiated divorce proceedings a month later. We showed up at his home, and the look on his face told me everything. He tried to deny it, but our search of the house told a different story. Bloodstains beneath the bedroom carpet, and rope and cloth identical to the materials used to bind the body. He was cornered, and he knew it. Eventually, he confessed, painting a picture of years of provocation and a final explosive argument. He claimed she'd taunted him one last time about her affair, and he snapped. He choked her, wrapped her body, and drove through the night. A silent 270-mile journey to the deepest lake in the country. He thought he'd gotten away with it, that the cold water would keep her secret forever. But he hadn't counted on a group of divers in need of a practice wait, or a new diver with a conscience. He was convicted of manslaughter, not murder, and served only a few years. It was cold comfort for Margaret's friends and family, a testament to how easily a life can be discarded and how long a secret can lie hidden in the dark depths. The call came in April 1977. I was with the Tofield RCMP detachment when a couple walked in with a story so bizarre it sounded like a bad movie script. They'd been scavenging for parts on an abandoned farm, and what they found wasn't a pump. It was a human foot sticking out of a septic tank. I remember the skepticism in the room, but we had to check it out. When we got to the farm, the stench hit us long before we saw the tank. It was a 6-foot-deep pit of putrid water and waste. Just as the couple had said, a pale, bloated foot protruded from the murky surface. It was a horrific sight. We didn't have the proper gear, so we improvised. With an old ice cream pail we found nearby, we started scooping, one pail at a time, for an hour. It was a gruesome, laborious process, but eventually, we uncovered what was left of the man inside. He was wrapped in a yellow bedsheet, bound with nylon rope, and stuffed headfirst into the tank. There was no ID, no wallet, nothing. The press dubbed him Septic Tank Sam. We had no idea who he was, but we knew one thing for certain: this was no accident. The autopsy was one of the most brutal I'd ever seen. He had been shot twice, but those weren't the injuries that haunted us. Before he died, he'd been tortured, cigarette burns, butane torch burns, and injuries so severe it took months to confirm his gender. This was personal, methodical violence. The killer had even tried to destroy the evidence by covering the body in quicklime, but it had the opposite effect, preserving the remains. The investigation hit a brick wall. We had a body with no name and a crime scene that gave up no clues. To make matters worse, the initial report contained a huge mistake. The medical examiner had classified him as Caucasian, which sent us down the wrong path for years. 2 years later, we exhumed the body and sent the skull to forensic experts in Oklahoma. They built a 3D reconstruction of his face and determined he was indigenous, around 35 years old. Still, no one recognized him. For decades, the case went cold. The name Septic Tank Sam was all he had, a mystery that gnawed at the community, a phantom killer in their midst. In 2019, we gained a new tool, forensic genealogy. Inspired by the success of the Golden State Killer case, we sent a degraded DNA sample to a private lab, Othram Inc. It was a last-ditch effort, but they worked a miracle, creating a genetic profile we could upload to public databases. We started building a family tree, working outward, hoping to find a living relative. In October 2020, we finally had a name: Gordon "Gordy" Sanderson, a 26-year-old indigenous man from Manitoba who had vanished sometime in the mid-70s. The heartbreak was immediate. His sister had reported him missing years ago, but because of the initial misidentification of his race, the dots were never connected. Gordy had been an indigenous child of the 60s scoop, a system that tore him from his family, leaving him to struggle. He was just a young man trying to reconnect with his brother when he vanished. Gordy wasn't a nameless victim. He was a son, a brother, a human being who had been failed by a system that couldn't even see who he was. We'd finally given him his name back, but the justice he deserved was still out there. We're still working the case, hunting for the people who took his life and discarded it like garbage. The investigation continues, but Gordy Sanderson is no longer just Septic Tank Sam. He's a man whose story is finally being told. I first got the call on a quiet Thursday morning, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes you notice the hum of your office lights. It was a missing person report, one of those that starts innocuously enough. A hiker who hadn't returned from a solo trek in the Pine Ridge region, hundreds of miles from the nearest town, a landscape of dense forests, jagged ridges, and abandoned logging roads. Nothing flashy. Just a man who didn't come back when he should have. The dispatcher gave me the details. His name was Alex Harper, 32, a freelance photographer with a reputation for wandering off the beaten path. No one had heard from him in 2 days, and the family was panicking. "He's careful," his sister had said. "He always checks in. Something's wrong." That was all the justification I needed to drive out to the region. When you deal with missing persons in remote areas, Hesitation can be fatal. By the time I reached the small ranger station that acted as the local outpost, the sun had already climbed halfway across the sky. I met with the deputies on site. They were polite, competent, but out of their depth. This wasn't a simple lost hiker situation. The terrain was rough, the weather unpredictable, and Alex was known for deliberately testing boundaries. Long solo hikes, off-trail excursions, sleeping in makeshift shelters. There were no witnesses. No one saw him leave. His vehicle was parked where he always left it, engine cold, gear packed, and seemingly untouched. It was a starting point, but it told me nothing about where he could have gone. I started at the edge of the trail he was last known to be on. Alex's hiking journal was left in the car, pages filled with cryptic notes about lighting, angles, and wildlife behavior. He wasn't just hiking, he was documenting something, photographing something only he knew. That added a layer of urgency. A man wandering with purpose is harder to find than someone lost by accident. I walked for hours through the thick underbrush, listening for anything that might break the silence. The snap of a twig underfoot, the distant call of a hawk, the whisper of wind through the pines. But the forest held its secrets tightly. By mid-afternoon, I found the first clue. A trail of disturbed soil, narrow and deep, as though someone heavy had passed through carrying gear. The footprints were Alex's size. At least this confirmed he'd started along the route he planned. But they disappeared abruptly near a boulder field. No indication of a fall, no drag marks, just nothing. I marked the area and radioed the deputies to bring in K9 units. While waiting, I scanned the landscape. The sun was dropping low, casting long shadows across the jagged terrain. Every tree became a sentinel, every rock a potential hiding place for a clue. I found remnants of a small fire, barely cold, but evidence someone had stopped there, possibly for warmth or to rest. A half-empty water bottle sat beside charred wood, and nearby a camera lens cap. That, I thought, was Alex's. He had an obsession with keeping track of equipment. Whoever found it or left it wanted it to be discovered. By nightfall, the search radius widened. The K9 units worked tirelessly, but the scent was confusing. Alex had likely been in this forest before, leaving traces that muddled the dog's tracking. I stayed behind with a couple of deputies, setting up lights around the small clearing where the fire had been. The night was unnervingly still, the kind of still where every rustle makes you jump. I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest itself was watching, that it had swallowed him whole. The next morning we found something else. A tripod, toppled, legs splayed, hidden partially by leaves. It suggested a struggle, but there were no signs of blood, no indications of a fight. Whoever was there had been careful. I photographed the scene, bagged the items, and continued mapping his last known movements. Days passed. We combed the ridges, the creek beds, the abandoned logging roads, and even a cave system Alex was known to explore. But there was nothing definitive. No trace of Alex, no signs of injury, no evidence of foul play. The forest had swallowed him, and the longer he was missing, the colder the trail became. I went back to the car he had left behind. Inside, I found his backpack, meticulously packed. Food, water, first aid, extra batteries, and a detailed map of the area, each point circled, notes scribbled in margins. One note caught my attention. The old ridge offers light before sunset. Shadows shift differently. Something waits there. That vague comment made me uneasy. He wasn't just hiking, he was chasing something, or anticipating something. I decided to take the ridge trail alone, despite warnings from the locals. By mid-afternoon, I reached a point overlooking a deep canyon. The wind howled like a living thing, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and pine sap. And then I saw it. A small campsite tucked into a grove of spruce, abandoned, but unmistakably Alex's. There was a half-eaten meal, a folded map, and a camera with a fresh memory card. Nothing else. I retrieved the memory card and examined it at the ranger station. The images were standard wilderness shots at first, streams, wildlife, shadows of clouds racing across the forest floor. But then, halfway through, the images changed. There were pictures of someone, no, something, moving just beyond the tree line. A blurred figure, watching. Not human. That thought made my stomach tighten. Then, a picture of Alex, taken from behind, his head slightly turned as if he sensed he was being observed. The final photo was of the ridge itself, but the horizon looked wrong, jagged, unnatural, as though the terrain shifted in a way it shouldn't. We expanded the search, calling in aerial units, more K9s, even local volunteers. Weeks turned into months. The forest gave up no answers. The camera never revealed a definitive assailant. His journal, his meticulous planning, suggested he didn't wander off by mistake. Something had intercepted him, or something he had been chasing had led him into peril. Months later, I returned alone, retracing the original trail. The wind had shifted the underbrush, the snow had melted and refrozen. And there, near the boulder field where his tracks had vanished, I found a small carved symbol etched into the bark of a pine tree. It wasn't random. It wasn't natural. It matched a symbol from his journal, the one he sketched obsessively on nearly every page leading up to the trip. Someone had left a marker, or he had, but he was gone. Over the years, I would revisit the trail, speak to locals, review his photographs, and try to reconstruct his last steps. The more I tried, the less certain I became. There were whispers of a hidden ravine, of cliffs that appeared suddenly and swallowed the unwary. There were theories, animal attack, robbery, foul play by another hiker, but none fit the precision of his disappearance. He was meticulous, careful, and yet he vanished completely. The case stayed open, files filled shelves. New technology, drones, thermal imaging, even DNA analysis of potential hair and fibers, nothing ever led to Alex Harper. The forest held him. It was as if he had been erased, not lost, but removed from the world entirely. And that's what haunted me more than anything, the certainty that somewhere, in that endless sprawl of trees, boulders, and ridges, Alex Harper still existed in some form. Not alive, not dead, just gone. A ghost, a cautionary tale, a reminder of how small a human is against the vast, indifferent wilderness. Years later, I still go back, alone sometimes, following the faint trail he left behind. I look for footprints, for broken branches, for any hint that he moved this way or that. But the forest doesn't answer. It never has, and I doubt it ever will. Alex Harper remains missing, the ultimate enigma of the Pine Ridge, a case that taught me how quickly one person can vanish into the middle of nowhere, and how little we as humans can do about it. I remember that October afternoon in 1998 like it's burned into my mind. Chelmsford, Massachusetts. The car wash sat on a busy strip wedged between gas stations and strip malls, the kind of place you'd pass 1,000 times without a second glance. I wasn't even on duty yet when the call came in. A young employee had been killing time, tossing a ball against the side of the building. Harmless enough, but one throw went wild, sailing over his head and into the vacant lot next door, a patch of weeds, cracked dirt, and nothing worth noticing, until he went to retrieve the ball. That's when he saw it. Something pale poking out of the soil, too white, too smooth to be a stone. He bent down, took a closer look. It was a jawbone, human. By the time I got there, the lot was crawling with uniforms. Over the next 3 days, we unearthed the rest, scattered bones in a shallow grave no deeper than 10 inches. No flesh left, but still hanging from the neck was a thin silver herringbone necklace, the kind that told me we were looking at a woman. Problem was, no one had reported anyone matching her description missing locally. No friends stepping forward. No family. My gut told me she'd been here for years. We sent the word out nationally. Female, roughly 5'5", gone anywhere from 5 to 20 years. Weeks later, a call came from Prince George's County, Maryland. They had an unsolved missing persons case from 1989, a 17-year-old named Nancy Ann Lackey Launt. Dental records matched. DNA confirmed it. Her bones had been lying just yards from people she once called family. And that's where the story got uglier. Nancy's life read like a roadmap of neglect and violence. Born into a home where love was absent and fists did the talking. Her mother, Leona, drank hard and hit harder. By the time Nancy was 4, she'd already suffered injuries no child should. One night, her leg was twisted until it snapped. That was when the state finally stepped in. Nancy and 2 siblings were removed and placed in foster care, though her brother Paul stayed behind. Even in safe homes, Nancy never stopped flinching at footsteps in the hall. She sucked her thumb until it bled, wet the bed into late childhood. In 1979, she was adopted by the Launt family. They moved to Fort Washington, Maryland. For a time, things seemed calmer. She drew, she wrote, she lost herself in music. But those old wounds never fully healed. By 1989, the pull toward her birth family was too strong to resist. She dropped out of school that summer, left the Launce without warning, and headed to Massachusetts to find Leona. She tracked her down to a rundown 6-unit building in North Billerica. No hugs, no reconciliation, just shared blood and an atmosphere so cold neighbors noticed. By December, Nancy was drowning in that toxic apartment, and then she vanished. No one, not her mother, not her brother, reported her missing. Leona assumed she'd gone back to Maryland. The Launce kept looking, but law enforcement wrote her off as another runaway. Her grave was a short walk from the car wash, and the man managing that car wash? Richard Lackey, Nancy's uncle, and by a twisted turn of family ties, also her stepfather. Her brother Paul worked there too. Both lived within shouting distance of her burial site. The connections were too neat to ignore. We leaned on the family, circled them for months. Nothing cracked. Then March 1999 came, and news hit from Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Richard Lackey was dead. Suicide. A note waited for us. "You were right. I did it. No details, no motive, just an ending." And Richard had a history. Back in 1968, he'd killed his fiancée after an argument, buried her in a shallow grave, 10 inches deep, served 8 years, walked out unchanged. With Richard gone, the case was closed on paper. But I can tell you this, Nancy Ann never had a chance. The people she ran to were the same ones she should have run from. And in the end, the truth was buried almost as shallow as her grave. Case 2. The Martins and the River. December 1958. Columbia River Gorge. A red and cream 54 Ford Country Squire rolled out of Portland with 5 passengers, Kenneth and Barbara Martin, and their daughters Barbie, Virginia, and Susan. They told friends they were heading east to collect fir branches for Christmas wreaths. By Monday morning, their home sat exactly as they'd left it, laundry mid-cycle, dishes in the sink. The Martins were gone. The trail started simply enough. Gas station owner Dean Baxter in Cascade Locks remembered them. Kenneth quiet, polite, paying for 5 gallons before heading east. Later, a waitress at the Paradise Snack Bar in Hood River said she'd serve them lunch. They were cheerful, ordinary, heading west again toward Portland. And then, nothing. Reports trickled in of a family matching their descriptions seen on the Washington side of the river that evening, but nothing concrete. On December 9th, Kenneth's boss filed a missing persons report. Officers entered the Martin home. No sign of forced entry, no packed bags, no sign they'd planned to be gone more than a day. Their bank accounts untouched. Cascade Locks offered the first real clue. Tire tracks leading too close to the riverbank, as if a car had backed in. Divers searched. Nothing. Then came the gun, found near an abandoned stolen 51 Chevy in the same area. A .38 Colt, dried blood on the barrel. Turned out, Kenneth and Barbara's estranged son Donald had stolen a similar gun years earlier while working at Meyer & Frank. He was living in New York at the time, so police crossed him off the list. 2 ex-cons had been caught driving that stolen Chevy. A diner witness swore they'd been in the Paradise Snack Bar at the same time as the Martins. Left minutes after them. Police cleared them too. 5 months passed. May 1959. A drilling rig near the Dalles hooked onto something heavy underwater, then lost it. Days later, 2 bodies surfaced, Susan and Virginia Martin. Both had drowned. One tech claimed he saw bullet holes in their skulls, but the medical examiner said it was decomposition damage. Strangest of all, metal traces, including aluminum, in Susan's clothing. Across the river sat an aluminum plant. Search teams swept the river again. Nothing. The car, Kenneth, and Barbara were still gone. Detective Walter Graven refused to let it go. He believed someone had run the Martins off the road, or worse, and that the car would prove it. Walter died in 1988 without finding it. 65 years later, in late 2024, a diver named Archer Mayo focused on Cascade Locks. Months of mapping the riverbed led him to a pit 6 meters deep. On his next dive, he found it, the twisted remains of a Ford buried in rock and silt 15 meters below the surface. March 6, 2025, the recovery began. A chassis, engine, and rear axle came up, red and cream paint, a near match to the Martin station wagon. No remains inside. The car now sits in a warehouse, waiting for forensic analysis. Was it an accident, or did someone make sure the Martins never came back from that Sunday drive? 65 years on, the Columbia River is still keeping that answer.